sometimes you see a headline that just makes you stop and reread it.
Uh-huh.
And recently, one really jumped out. Katy Perry, the pop superstar, took a trip to space.
Right.
Okay, so we have to unpack this because, it's not just celebrity news, is it? It connects straight into some really, cutting-edge things happening with space exploration.
Absolutely. And what's fascinating, I think, is exactly that collision. You've got the mainstream culture meeting this field that was once pretty niche but is advancing so fast.
Yeah.
Katy Perry going up there, it puts a very recognizable face on commercial space travel. And, it opens up a whole bunch of questions about what this future actually looks like.
Totally. You send over the news reports, obviously, but also that technical info on Blue Origin's new Shepard.
Right, the system she flew on.
And what really grabbed me, the reason you flagged it, I think, was this whole idea of space tourism just becoming, real.
Yeah.
It's not just government astronauts anymore, is it?
Not at all.
So we both got curious. What's this experience actually like? What does it really mean for the bigger picture, getting more people into space commercially? So that's kind of our mission today, right? To really dig into this flight and everything around it.
Yeah, exactly. If you sort of step back, Katy Perry's flight, it's a really visible marker, isn't it? And a pretty big shift. By understanding the specifics, her flight, the tech involved, we can get a much clearer picture of where this whole industry might be heading.
Okay, let's get down to the details then. The news reports, they're pretty clear. Katy Perry definitely went to space. And the date was Monday, April 14th, 2025.
That's right. And the timing is, it's significant. It puts it squarely within Blue Origin's operational phase for human flights.
Right. And it wasn't just her, was it? She went up with an all-female crew. That detail really stood out to me.
It did.
What do you think that signifies? Especially this early in the commercial game.
Well, it certainly presents an interesting narrative, doesn't it? Perhaps it's an intentional move, highlighting broader representation as these kinds of private space travel opportunities open up.
Could be. Now, the vehicle, Blue Origin's new Shepard. We looked at some of the tech specs.
Yeah.
And this is where it gets really interesting, I think. Tell us a bit about what makes this thing, unique.
Okay, so New Shepard, it's designed specifically for suborbital flights, and its architecture is vertical takeoff, vertical landing, VTVL.
Right.
Which is quite different from, the traditional rockets that just discard stages into the ocean. Being able to reuse the booster, that's a really key factor in potentially making this whole commercial spaceflight thing more, economically viable.
Sustainable.
Reusable rockets. It still sounds a bit sci-fi, even though we know it's happening.
It does, yeah. But it's here. And another really key aspect, the whole flight, launch to landing, it's autonomous.
Autonomous. So wait, no pilots actually flying the thing during launch and landing?
Yep. Wow. That takes a huge amount of confidence in the systems, doesn't it?
Precisely. The system's designed to handle all the flight phases automatically. Of course, there's constant monitoring from ground control, but yeah, it's autonomous. It reflects some pretty big steps in aerospace automation and safety protocols.
And this tech didn't just pop up overnight, did it? Blue Origin's been at this for a while.
Oh, yeah, a long time. Their very first development vehicle, they nicknamed it Goddard. It actually had a successful launch and landing way back in 2006.
2006, wow.
Yeah, so that's, nearly 2 decades of development, testing, refining. Then the first flight of the actual, New Shepard vehicle we see now, that was back in 2015.
That long timeline, it really highlights how complex this stuff is, the amount of testing involved.
Definitely.
I also remember reading something about the program being grounded for a bit.
Yes, that's right. September 2022, the FAA grounded the New Shepard fleet. It was after an in-flight abort during an uncrewed mission. The capsule ejected safely, but the booster was lost.
Oh.
And that was a pretty stark reminder, wasn't it? About the inherent risks still involved in spaceflight and, the crucial role of regulatory oversight like the FAA.
For sure. Safety's got to be paramount, even with all the progress. But they're flying crews again now.
Yes. Blue Origin worked through the issues the FAA identified, and crewed flights started up again in May 2024. So it seems the regulatory concerns were met.
Okay. And there was also that mention of a moon gravity launch planned for January 2025. That sounds interesting, like they're simulating different G-forces.
Yeah, that likely points towards, ongoing testing, maybe further development efforts, could be about refining the vehicle's capabilities, or perhaps studying how things behave under different gravity levels, maybe looking ahead to, future advancements. It suggests the program is still very much, evolving actively.
Okay, so Katy Perry and her crew, they experienced this autonomous suborbital flight on this vehicle with, well, quite a track record now, despite that hiccup. Based on what we know about New Shepard, what would that actual experience in space have been like for them?
Well, given it's a suborbital trajectory, the time spent actually weightless would have been pretty brief.
Right.
Likely just several minutes, maybe 4 or 5.
Right.
Right at the top of the arc, the apogee.
Okay.
And the whole mission itself, launch to landing, is also very quick. Probably in the range of, say, 10 to 15 minutes total.
So definitely not like the astronauts on the ISS floating around for days or weeks. This is more like a quick pop up to the edge of space and then back down.
Exactly. And if we look at that FAA report you sent over, this fits right in with their current view, which is that the main purpose of commercial human spaceflight, right now anyway, is basically adventure.
Adventure, huh?
Yeah. It's focused on that unique, maybe transformative experience, right? Reaching space, feeling weightlessness, seeing the Earth from up there.
Framing it as adventure really puts it in perspective. It's a totally different goal compared to, say, scientific research on long orbital missions.
Totally different. Orbital flight needs way higher speeds, higher altitudes, which means much bigger rockets, complex life support for, potentially long durations. Suborbital is just a different category.
Which brings us nicely to that crucial topic. Space tourism and, well, safety regulations. You mentioned that FAA report looking at readiness for safety rules. What's the story there?
Right. So the FAA, they're the ones in charge of overseeing safety for commercial human spaceflight in the U.S.
Okay.
And the report you're talking about, it discusses this learning period that Congress set up. Part of that was a temporary moratorium, a pause on certain safety regulations, specifically rules about the design of spacecraft carrying these spaceflight participants. That moratorium ran until October 1st, 2023.
So hold on. During that learning period, the FAA wasn't actually enforcing specific design rules for these tourist spaceships.
Essentially, yes. The intention was to give the industry room to breathe, to innovate and develop without being immediately locked into potentially, premature or overly rigid design rules.
Okay.
But, and this is important, the FAA didn't just step away completely. They kept their authority to step in and regulate if something bad happened, like a serious injury or, God forbid, a fatality involving a participant, even during the moratorium.
Okay. So there was still a safety net, kind of, giving the industry some rope but ready to pull it back if needed. What's the industry saying about all this, their perspective?
Well, the report suggests the industry, the companies doing this, they've raised concerns. They basically argue it's tough to create universal safety standards right now.
Why is that?
Because the companies are all quite different, different ways of operating, different vehicle designs, different technologies. They're even aiming at slightly different market segments. So one-size-fits-all set of rules. They argue it's tricky to implement effectively at this stage.
Yeah, I can see that. The safety needs for a quick up-and-down suborbital hop might be pretty different from, say, a planned week-long orbital hotel stay or a trip around the moon.
Exactly. And the report also touches on the sort of subjective side of assessing safety in these, adventure activities. It makes an interesting comparison to how other adventure sports get regulated here on Earth.
So,
often it's through state courts, using the legal idea of duty of care.
duty of care,
Yeah.
meaning the companies have a basic responsibility to be reasonably careful, right, to keep customers safe, even if the customers know there's risk involved and signed waivers.
Precisely that. Legal cases and things like, say, mountaineering or scuba diving, they've established that the providers have to mitigate the risks they can foresee and can't be negligent. That legal framework acts as a kind of oversight.
It's fascinating thinking about space tourism like that. You sign the paper saying you know it's risky, but the company still has to do its job properly.
That's the basic idea. And the report also notes that Congress, when they gave guidance to the FAA, they stressed finding a balance.
A balance between
Ensuring safety, obviously, but also allowing the commercial space industry to grow and advance. The goal was to avoid rules that might just stifle innovation right out of the gate in this, emerging sector.
Sounds like a constant tightrope walk, doesn't it? Promote safety, but don't kill progress.
It really is a delicate equilibrium. And even the term they use, spaceflight participant, that's quite deliberate too, I think.
How so?
It underscores that these aren't professional, government-trained astronauts. They're participants undertaking something that has a defined and likely higher level of inherent risk.
Okay, so Katy Perry's flight happens right in the middle of this evolving scene, commercial tourism taking off, but with these ongoing debates about safety, risk, and the right way to regulate it all.
Exactly.
Now, let's zoom out a bit, put this in the wider context. What else is going on in space exploration generally?
Well, NASA's 2022 strategic plan gives a good overview of their big goals. A major one is pushing human presence further out back to the moon and then eventually onto Mars for like sustained long-term exploration.
Right, that's the whole Artemis program we hear about, building up a moon presence. So while Blue Origin is doing these adventure flights, NASA's aiming for these much bigger, longer-term exploration goals.
Exactly. But interestingly, that NASA plan also specifically talks about stimulating economic growth through commercial space activities. So NASA sees companies like Blue Origin, like SpaceX, as part of the whole ecosystem. They're not separate worlds.
So it's not just government space programs anymore. There's a real kind of synergy now between the public and private sectors in space.
Definitely. And it goes international, too. Look at the Artemis Accords.
Right, I've heard of those.
They basically lay out a framework for how different countries can cooperate on exploring and using the moon responsibly, hopefully.
So international agreements are being set up for, like, moon activities. That's a pretty big deal in itself.
It is. So Katy Perry's flight, yes, it's commercial, but it exists within this much larger global picture. Government missions, commercial activities, international cooperation. It's not happening in a vacuum, so to speak. Right. And it's not just the U.S. active out there either, is it? The sources mention other countries' space programs.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
For instance, ISRO, that's the Indian Space Research Organization, they successfully launched their NVS-U2 navigation satellite back on January 29th, 2025.
Okay.
It just highlights that space is truly a global domain now. Lots of countries pursuing lots of different goals.
Navigation satellites, Earth observation, climate monitoring. A whole range of missions besides just taking people up for a quick look around.
Precisely. The current focus for commercial human spaceflight is largely that adventure tourism piece, like we discussed. Whereas the government programs, they're often focused on the science, the Earth monitoring, and those really long-term exploration goals.
Okay, so wrapping this all up, Katy Perry's trip on New Shepard, it really gives us a snapshot, doesn't it, of where commercial space tourism is right now. It's this suborbital adventure experience, still pretty early days.
Right.
With all these ongoing discussions about safety, about how much risk is acceptable, and finding the right regulatory path forward. And it's all happening against this huge backdrop of other space activities. NASA's push to the moon and Mars, international collaborations, scientific missions from agencies all over the world.
You know, you shared these sources because, well, like me, you wanted to get a better handle on this whole phenomenon, this rise of commercial spaceflight. And hopefully this deep dive has given everyone listening maybe a clearer picture of what this first step towards broader human access to space actually looks like right now.
Yeah, and it leaves us with a pretty big question to think about, doesn't it? As more and more people take these commercial flights, how is that balance going to shift, between risk, regulation, and the drive to keep exploring further? And maybe more fundamentally, what's the long-term impact going to be of having more humans, more kinds of humans, experiencing space firsthand? How will that change how we think about space, how we use it?
Absolutely. Definitely food for thought. Thanks for digging into all that with me today.